Hello and welcome to Hamilton the Podcast, the What Comes Next Curtain Call episode. I'm Vinton Bain.
And I'm Robbie Herlocker.
This episode, we're going to be covering the cast and the creators of Hamilton, the ones who are still there and the ones who are leaving, and what they're doing in the future.
Right, we thought that it would be appropriate now that we've closed the curtain on Hamilton the musical. We just covered the final song in it. We want the cast members to come to the front of the stage and take their bow, so to speak. We want to acknowledge what they've done, where they're going, what they're doing with their lives now. And we want to acknowledge those people who are coming in to fill their shoes and all the people that have worked really, really hard on this musical. We won't be able to name everybody. We won't be able to in a short podcast episode, but we'd love to give you a little bit of a handle on where some of these people are going now.
So before we dive into the people that we know and love who have performed these roles and what they're going to be up to for the next coming years that we know of, Robbie, you have something you want to talk about on legacy here.
Yeah, I mean, this idea of doing the curtain call episode really does tie a lot to what the whole idea and theme of Hamilton is in general, right? Because we just had our whole episode about legacy. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story. It's the idea that you don't get to choose who will narrate your life when you're gone. And so today we're going to talk about one of those unique real-life applications of the torch-passing concept. Remember, even though the original cast album has immortalized for us the original cast, Broadway itself is a medium that is dedicated to live theater. Live means there are going to be mistakes. It also means that things are going to change. And it means that people like Daveed Diggs may have cemented the roles of Lafayette and Jefferson into our hearts forever, but he has since had to pass that role off to someone else, and he has no control how the next Jefferson will play the role, does he? He doesn't get to choose exactly how that role will continue.
That's right, and it's got to be hard forming that role and becoming the person who is famous for playing that role, setting the precedent for what that role should be as an actor, and then watching it from off stage as someone else takes on that role.
Yeah, he has definitely passed that torch along, and it's going to be fascinating to see what comes next for the new actors, the new cast members that are coming on board. I recently listened to an NPR show, Fresh Air, where they were doing an interview of Barbara Cook. She's a Broadway singer. If you're not aware, she was the original Madam Librarian Marian from The Music Man on Broadway. So in the 1950s album, when you listen to it, it's her singing all of those lines. It's fascinating.
So cool.
She's so talented, and she has been talented this entire time. She's still singing today. Her voice has changed a lot, but it's interesting when you listen to this interview.
It's always amazing to me when you have someone that lives long enough and had such an impact on the world that far back that they can now look back on it and 60 years later give commentary over where it's come and what's gone since then.
Yeah, exactly. So the interviewer was asking Barbara Cook, what are some of the thoughts you have about looking back on some of the roles you played early on and how they've been taken by new singers, new actors, new people are taking this role and doing new things with it. How is that? And she said that it's a little bit frustrating watching some of these people take these roles that she loved, the roles that she helped to create, and do things that she wouldn't have necessarily done with it. But she's had to learn how to let go, learn how new people can give new breath to this idea that she started out. She was talking about the Leonard Bernstein musical, Candide,
right.
And she sang a few lines from Glitter and Be Gay, one of the show-stopping numbers there. It's really fun. She said that song's supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be delightful, but a lot of the people that perform it today are pushing it past delightful to flat out silly, and she just can't stand that type of approach to it. She said that there's this one point in the song where Leonard Bernstein wanted the ha-ha-has to be separated into separate staccato notes, and she goes into her whole musical rant about that, saying they're supposed to be ha-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha. I'm not going to try to sing because Barbara Cook is amazing, and she is so good at it. We'll link to the interview in the show notes. But she goes through and she says they're supposed to be ha-has, staccato notes. Every single one is an interesting ha. But nowadays, when people sing it, they're just going, ah, and they're just not actually separating them. And so she was saying, it's the way it's supposed to be. It was my way of doing it. I learned this. I worked hard with the creator of the show. This is what it's supposed to be. But this is just an example of how Broadway is a living, record that's passed down from people like Barbara Cook to Shirley Jones, who played Miriam in the movie version that I learned and loved of The Music Man. And then eventually that role of Miriam was played by hundreds of high school sopranos who have passed down that role, and some of them have done it amazingly, and some people have probably done it pretty poorly. But these are roles that we pass down, and Barbara Cook has no control of the legacy of those roles past the time when she was playing that role on the stage. It's like she planted the seeds for how she wanted that story and that role to be told, but now the garden has blossomed and has outgrown her own time on Broadway. And now lots of other people are tending to the garden, are making more out of those roles. And so the two things we want to do in this curtain call episode is, one, we want to look at some of those people who have picked up the torch and are now running with the roles of Aaron Burr, now that Leslie Odom Jr. has set that role down. And we want to look at some of those new people and see what they're like. Just kind of dive into some of their story. We don't have a lot of that because some of you can really dive into how to learn more about them online, but we want to get into some of those names at least. And then the second thing we want to do is look at the original cast that we have fallen in love with and see what else they're doing, because there are places we can go to support their ongoing efforts, their ongoing making of new things, their new creative endeavors of art, and some of their things are amazing. And I can't wait to talk about that. So we want to be doing that. This is our curtain call episode of showing appreciation where appreciation is due.
So like Robbie mentioned, we're going to be starting out here talking about the people that have replaced the cast and crew that we love.
That's not to say we don't love the new guys.
Right. We've already grown to love, and these new people, we now have to watch and grow to love them as well.
Absolutely.
So we're not going in a particular order here, but just going straight down, we're going to be covering the Broadway cast first. And Alexander Hamilton, played by Lin-Manuel Miranda, as we all know, Lin-Manuel Miranda has stepped down and has been replaced by Javier Munoz.
Yeah, Javier was his understudy this entire time. He was doing, I think, the Sunday shows whenever Lin-Manuel Miranda needed a day off. And so he was working alongside Lin-Manuel to create this role already. And so he was there the entire time on Broadway doing the Hamilton thing. And so now he's taken the reins and he is Alexander Hamilton. It's incredible. One of the things worth noting about Javier is that this is the second time he has taken over a role for Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Oh, nice.
When he was in The Heights, he played Usnavi, the narrator of that story, and he was going through it, and it's interesting because Lin-Manuel Miranda passed it on to Javier Munoz, and now Hamilton has come along, and Miranda looks to the same person to fill those shoes. And it's interesting because they have that similar style and that unique approach to the characters. And so they've created this side by side, and Miranda has nothing but praise for him.
Yeah, he trusts him enough to say, hey, this is my baby, and only you can take over for it right now.
Right.
Maybe in the future I can trust somebody else, but you're the one I choose right now to hold this baby and take care of it.
You're the one that I want.
Yeah, yes.
Ooh, honey.
So next on our Broadway cast, we have Aaron Burr, Leslie Odom Jr. being replaced by Brandon Victor Dixon.
Brandon did a Facebook Live event. You can go on to the Hamilton the Musical Facebook page and see the video that Brandon did. It was really funny to see this. He was going on and he said, this is my third or fourth performance as Aaron Burr on the stage. And he's kind of saying, I'm getting ready, putting on my fancy shirt. And he talks about the frills on his sleeves and how he wants to get one made so he could just walk down the streets of New York City.
Oh, he totally should.
Oh, yeah, I would wear it. It'd be fun. And so he's just going through, getting ready for the show. They call 5 minutes or something, and he's like, oh, I'm ignoring that. The Facebook Live is more important. And so it's interesting to watch him. He's such a fun, interesting person.
That's so great.
Brandon is a Broadway veteran, and he's been in a few different shows. He was Tony nominated for his role in The Color Purple as Harpo. We've talked about The Color Purple a little bit when we were talking about the Tonys.
Yeah.
And it's such a great, important musical, and I would have loved to see him in that role, but he's also been on a couple other shows across the stage, so he's an acting veteran.
That's right. He's also been Tony nominated in a couple of other roles, and I'm really excited to see how he takes on this role in our beloved musical. Next, replacing Pippa Sue for Eliza Schuyler Hamilton, we have Lexi Lawson, and we don't know much about Lexi, so it'll be really interesting to see how she takes the character.
Playing Eliza's sister, Angelica Schuyler Church, replacing Renee Elise Goldsberry, will be Mandy Gonzalez. She's also a Broadway veteran. She's played the roles of Elphaba in Wicked, which is So fun. Have you seen Wicked?
I haven't, and I've always wanted to. I wish they would release a recording of that.
Oh, it's so great. It's fantastic.
Not just an auditory one. I want to watch it.
Right. And then Nina Rosario was the role she played in The Heights. So it's interesting how many of these actors have come from In the Heights into Lin-Manuel Miranda's new musical.
Right. Now, when it comes to replacing Daveed Diggs in his role of Marquis de Lafayette and Thomas Jefferson, they haven't come down to a decision, it doesn't look like.
Yeah, on Playbill.com, we noticed that Andrew Chappelle and Seth Stewart are both listed as understudies, filling the role now that Daveed Diggs has stepped down, but it looked like they were still holding auditions, kind of looking for who would be the next Daveed Diggs to take the horse by the reins and lead us into the new era of a different Jefferson and a different Lafayette. It's going to be interesting to see how they take that role and what they do with it. I would like to put myself forward as an option here. I know I'm a white guy in Oklahoma, but man, that'd be so much fun.
It would be.
That'd be great.
You're actually pretty good at doing that fast rapping.
Oh, thanks. Who would you play if you could be any of the cast?
Can I be like a stagehand? I don't want.
Do you want to run a spotlight?
Too much pressure. Yeah.
No, I do love Daveed Diggs' roles. He's amazing. It is a rite of passage, right? For every Hamilton fan, you want to try to rap as fast as Lafayette. I say it's FTL speed, faster than Lafayette.
Right. I think I just want to be part of the hype crew. I just want to be the guy that's in the back, like cheering on the people going out to be like, yeah, go do it. You're doing great. It's awesome.
You got this, guys. If you're listening to this episode and you have new information, we definitely want you to reach out to us and tell us what you've learned about who's taking over these roles now and what they're like, who they are. If you have fun little stories about interacting with them, shoot those to us in our email. We'll give you all that contact info at the end of this episode, but we'd love to hear about your stories about interacting with these new cast members. But it'll be interesting to see who fills these shoes of Daveed Diggs over time.
Now, moving on to George Washington, he's staying, so we can go on to King George.
We don't have to learn how to say goodbye to Chris Jackson yet.
You know, that's actually really interesting to think about.
He's the one who taught us how to say goodbye, but he hasn't said goodbye yet.
He's not saying goodbye. King George, on the other hand, who has had multiple other people play him, aside from Jonathan Groff, the one that we came to know and love, has been replaced by Rory O'Malley.
That's right. Jonathan Groff was the original actor in the original Broadway cast, but before the show made it to Broadway, in the off-Broadway production at the Public Theater, Brian Darcy James was the one in the regalia of King George III. When I went to New York last December, I got to see Brian Darcy James in Something Rotten.
Oh, yeah.
He is so talented. My goodness, he is talented. And looking at his facial expressions, I wish I could have seen more of him in this role. But yeah, Jonathan Groff, he is amazing at this role. Talking about Rory O'Malley now, though, the man who is wearing the crown, the one whose tea we throw in the harbor, King George III, he has a history on Broadway as well. If any of you have listened to the Book of Mormon original cast album, you've heard his voice as Elder McKinley. He is a really, really fun character in the Book of Mormon that apparently this character was slightly tweaked after Rory O'Malley met the writers, and they were like, hey, we know that this guy is amazingly talented. Let's give him more lines to sing because he is great. And I mean, Book of Mormon is a fun musical on Broadway.
It is a lot of fun.
Another random little tidbit, not to get political in this podcast or anything, but Rory O'Malley is the co-founder of Broadway Impact, a gay rights group that has been really active and doing some really interesting things and really progressive, good things in the community of Broadway. Whenever there was the terrible mass shooting in Florida at the Pulse nightclub, Broadway Impact did a lot of incredible things to surround that community and reach out to them. And so he is one of the people who has led that and co-founded it as a person on Broadway representing that as an openly gay man.
And that's the last of our Broadway changes because Jasmine Jones, Anthony Ramos, and Oak are all staying on the Broadway performance at this moment.
One of the interesting progressions, though, about Hamilton, an American musical, one of the things we love about it is that it is finally going on tour.
Right.
We've had the opportunity now, through social media efforts, to meet some of the Chicago cast that is taking Hamilton to the Midwest.
And so obviously we have a whole new cast performing in Chicago. And we're not going to go name by name on this cast listing because we don't know very much about the people doing these roles. But we really look forward to seeing how they perform the characters.
Yeah, if you're not following Hamilton and American Musical on Facebook, then you probably should, because if you get notifications from them, you'll see whenever they're doing a new live event. And the Chicago cast and the on-Broadway cast has been able to show us a lot of interesting backstage personalities of these cast members. And so I got to see George Washington from Chicago, that's Jonathan Kirkland, playing that role. I got to see him just hanging out with Facebook online because he had some interesting things to say, just telling us a little bit about who he is, what he's been through, what his dream roles were. And so, again, if you go to the Facebook page, scroll through the past videos, you can see this and kind of get to know the cast members a little bit more for this new cast. I'm fascinated to see what happens there. And once Hamilton goes even further, once we get an LA cast and a DC cast, and we have some other casts taking this over, we're going to see more and more people picking up that torch, fanning the spark into a flame, and passing that flame along to a new generation of more and more people spreading the good news, according to Lin-Manuel Miranda of the Gospel of Hamilton.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting, too, because I even saw a group, and I can't remember if it was UK or London specifically, but they're trying to get Hamilton there. And I just couldn't stop wondering about how different the audience would view it from a non-American perspective.
Yeah, my goodness. That'd be interesting to see that the English loyalists are portrayed as the antagonists of the first act.
Right. So if you are one of those type of fans coming from overseas, let us know how you view this musical. We'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on everything.
Absolutely. Shoot us an email. We would love to hear from you.
All right. So that's going to take us to the cast and crew that we grew to love, what they're doing now.
Right. So now that they've left the stage, we want to follow them into their new creative endeavors, see what they're doing next, see what comes next for, well, let's just start with our creator and our title character, Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda.
That's right. Let's start with the man who started it all, which would probably be Ron Chernow. Let's be honest, but we're going to end with him. So we're going to start.
Well, I mean,
with
if we're going all the way back, we can get to Hamilton.
We'll start with we already started with Hamilton. That was episodes ago.
Rachel Hamilton.
So Lin-Manuel Miranda, as a lot of people probably know at this point because they're advertising this now, wrote songs for Walt Disney Animation Studios' feature film Mona, which is coming out November 23rd, 2016.
Right, and this isn't the first thing he's arranged and composed for Disney Studios. He had a piece that the cantina scene in the new Star Wars Force Awakens movie was composed by him.
That's right, because John Williams didn't want to write a new cantina piece because he wanted to focus on the rest of the orchestra. So J.J. Abrams actually invited Lin-Manuel Miranda to write that song, which is so amazing. And I really hope that since we have more Star Wars movies coming out, that Lin-Manuel Miranda has more input now that he has that foot in the door to do some more musical things in Star Wars.
Right. I remember sitting through all of the credits of The Force Awakens when I went to see it the first time, and I had to do a double take because I saw his name up there and I thought, man, I'm going crazy. I'm just seeing Lin-Manuel Miranda everywhere now, but it was true. He was up there on the sign, and that's when I got my phone out because, I mean, people were already leaving the theater. It wasn't being rude. So I was Googling it. I saw it. I was amazed. I was so excited. So I obviously had to go a second time to see the movie. One, because it's great, and two, because I wanted to listen more explicitly for that song in particular.
And we've already mentioned this next one, but just to say it again, Lin-Manuel Miranda has been cast in the Mary Poppins sequel to star alongside Emily Blunt. And we did find out actually recently that this movie comes out December 25th, 2018, or so they say, unless it gets delayed.
In addition to his role as Jack in Mary Poppins Returns, we will get to see a little bit of Lin-Manuel Miranda's work on the new Little Mermaid live-action remake film. Did you know they were doing that film?
I knew that they were going to be doing it sometime in the future. I had not, until I was making notes for this, known that Lin-Manuel Miranda was going to be involved at all.
Right. I found out about the live-action Little Mermaid remake when one of our friends was tweeting about it with all capital letters and full excitement, absolutely amazed at how her childhood was now being remade in the live-action version that Disney has announced that they're going to do. It's going to be interesting to see Lin-Manuel Miranda's work on that.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see him produce that and do composing with Alan Menken. I'm really interested to see how that comes together.
And apparently they're going to have a mix of the original songs, which is great because...
It's fantastic.
I mean, look at this stuff. Isn't it neat? Wouldn't you think my collection's complete? Wouldn't you think I'm the girl who has everything? I've got gadgets and gizmos aplenty. I've got who's it's and what's it's galore. You want thingamabobs?
No.
Oh. Well, I've got 20.
That's too many.
But who cares? Not Vinton. I want more.
I want less.
I want to go on with this podcast now. But I've really got these songs in my head.
And to just be a completionist, Lin-Manuel has a minor role in a 2016 film called Speech and Debate, which I can find almost nothing about except that it's a movie and it's going to exist or does exist maybe.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that.
Know. Also, he appeared in the second season of Difficult People this year.
Oh, cool. Did you know he was also in an episode of House?
Yes.
It was a fun one. I didn't watch the full episode, but I watched all of the clips on YouTube of his role.
Yeah, he actually has been in a lot of different things in the past, so check out his IMDb page and
Absolutely.
Go watch all of that TV because you'll enjoy it.
So can I tell you what I'm proudest of, or what I'm most excited for at least?
Yes.
What I'm most excited for is that Lin-Manuel Miranda has signed on to do an episode of Drunk History on Comedy Central for Hamilton. It's going to be super exciting to watch him get drunk and narrate the story of Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr and narrate his passion for this story in the Comedy Central version of it. And they've already announced a couple of the other people that are going to be playing the roles. I'm really excited for Aubrey Plaza, who's, April Ludgate on Parks and Rec, right? She's amazing.
About this.
She's going to be one of the roles in there. I think she's playing Aaron Burr. And Hamilton is going to be played by Aaliyah Shokit from Arrested Development. I may not be pronouncing her name correctly. I don't know. I apologize if I messed it up.
Right, but it's maybe from Arrested Development. I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. So, Drunk History, we will let you know as soon as we have a release date for it. We know that the upcoming season starts on September 27th. If you know more than us, hit us up at contact@graphocast.com.
Moving on to Leslie Odom Jr., he actually released a CD, as we all know, this year, which I didn't know this previously. I just learned this recently that this was actually a re-release, that he went back into the studio and reworked and fixed some things and then re-released it. He had released this album originally in 2014, but due to lack of sales and him not being satisfied completely with the work he had done there, he returned to the studio to record longer, more focused album.
And there were a few new songs that he added to the album as well when he re-released it. He put 4 new songs that he's released there. He's already done a couple tour stops, I know. I saw on Twitter that some of my friends were in Salt Lake City and got to see him on stage when he was performing somewhere around Brigham Young University, and it was just interesting to see that he's already going to new places, doing new things, taking his art elsewhere, and I was so jealous of my friends that got tickets. One of them tweeted about how Leslie Odom Jr. looked directly in her eyes, and I'm sure that everyone in the audience thought that, but it was just so exciting. I would love to have been in the room where that happened, to be able to be an audience member there. So, Leslie Odom Jr., if you're ever coming near Oklahoma City, Oklahoma to do your performance, or even within a 5 to 10 mile radius of this area, hit us up. We would love to see you.
5 to 10, more like 500 to 1,000.
Right. Yeah, I'll absolutely travel for that.
Especially if he hits us up. I'll travel pretty far.
Man.
I would walk 500 miles.
And I would walk 500 more.
Speaking of his touring and his musical career, he will be joining Cynthia Erivo, I'm not sure how to pronounce that name, apologies, from The Color Purple on October 1st at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center for the 21st Annual Spotlight Gala of the Women's Association of NJPAC, that's New Jersey Performing Arts Center, which supports the Performing Arts Center Department of Education and General Operations of the venue. So that'll be exciting if you could go see that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see 2 Tony Award winners up there performing in the same show. Man, so much fun.
And if you want to see something aside from his musical career, he was on an episode of The Good Wife earlier this year. Now, Philippa Sue, Pippa, who plays Eliza, is actually scheduled to appear in the title role for the pre-Broadway engagement of Amelie in Los Angeles from December 2016 to January 2017. And then that show is set to open on Broadway in the spring of 2017, with her continuing to star in that role. And I'm pretty excited about that. I really like Amelie.
I haven't seen the movie Amelie, but I'm really interested in going into it and diving into that now that I know that Pippa is going to be on that. One of the other things that she is going to be doing as her next adventures is that we mentioned already that Lin-Manuel Miranda is going to be working with Mona in the upcoming Disney production, but Philippa Sue will also be doing voice work in that movie.
That's right. And I had heard a rumor early on that she was going to be a main character, but she's now listed as a villager of Matunui Island, which sounds like more of a background character. So I'm interested to see what role she actually has in the film when it comes out.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait until it's closer to the time of the release before we'll really know for sure. Moving from one Skylar sister to the other, Vinton, what can you tell us about Renee Elise Goldsberry's future career?
Well, we mentioned The Good Wife earlier. She actually had a reoccurring role on The Good Wife, so you can catch her on multiple episodes of that show. I think 23 in total.
It's like someone went to IMDb before we started this.
But moving forward, in 2017, she will star in a Netflix series called Altered Carbon, based off of a book. She'll star as a character called Quailchrist Falconer, which makes me think that this show is going to be awesome, because that sounds like an awesome name.
That's a great name.
There's almost no information else aside from that it is based off a book, so I guess I could have gone and read about the book. But there will be 10 episodes, and it's supposed to be in sometime in 2017, so look forward to that.
Man, I want to create a Dungeons & Dragons character named Quailchrist Falconer. That just sounds epic.
Right?
I heard another announcement recently that Renee Elise Goldsberry will be in an HBO show alongside Oprah Winfrey and Rose Byrne. She's going to be in the television film adaptation of the book The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and will apparently be playing the title role.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Lots of good stuff coming here, because also, speaking of Netflix, like I mentioned earlier, she's going to be playing Misty Holloway in the continuation of The Get Down next year.
I love The Get Down. Are you watching that?
I just started it, and it is fantastic.
Man. It is so good. We should cover it. It's Hamilton-esque, right?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of connection there. If you like Hamilton, you're going to like The Get Down, I think.
It covers the history of hip-hop and the origins of it in the Bronx, and it's an interesting little fiction story that they follow there that has a lot of really fun moments.
Moving on now to one of our favorites, Daveed Diggs. They're all our favorites, but I love Daveed Diggs.
Right. Talking about the history of hip-hop to one of the kings of modern-day Broadway hip-hop, at least, Daveed Diggs.
Now, he does a lot of rapping, and he has multiple groups here. He's the vocalist for an experimental hip-hop group called Clipping, who just released a new album entitled Splendor and Misery. And I say just released, and I mean just released, as in the day we're recording this, it came out today. And when I was looking up notes, I saw that it came out and listened to the whole thing while I was taking my notes. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I knew that it was coming out, but I didn't know until I got to your house to record this episode that it had dropped today. So we listened to the first couple tracks, and I was just like, no. We can't record yet. I need you to pull up the lyrics here so that I can learn this and take some time to memorize these fast raps that Daveed Diggs is dropping on this track. It's so good.
Right. It opens up with a track where he really presents that speed rapping Lafayette that we've become familiar with in our musical.
Right. I'm totally going to butcher this. I've just listened to this about 10 minutes before we started recording, but it starts out with something like, generally operating normally, a small anomaly has become evident. It probably should be noted. There is spiking in the pulse of the member of the cargo, and the crew and other passengers are not begun to notice. The facility you certainly take yourself to cultivate for all intents and purposes is totally accepted, but the readings that are coming through are not. Negating wholly the hypothesis seems to be unable to suggest it. First, okay, I can't go on any further. I'm just not as good at this.
I'm impressed.
But yeah, Daveed Diggs, fantastic. The thing that's interesting, though, is whenever I listen to him rapping with clippings, I hear him say his own name, Daveed Diggs, like rappers often do. And I think, man, I've been listening to Thomas Jefferson do these lines, and you're not supposed to break character, Thomas Jefferson. You're not supposed to say that you're Daveed Diggs. I think of you as Lafayette now when I hear you. I think of you as Thomas Jefferson when I hear you. But man, that man is talented. And if you think Lafayette raps quickly, listen to this album, because Daveed Diggs is so much faster than that.
He's also a member of a group called True Neutral Crew. They also released an album this year. It was their debut album, Soft Rules. It's a lot of fun as well. I recommend checking that one out.
In addition to all of his collaborative efforts, Diggs has announced that he's been working on a new solo rap release, set for release sometime at the end of this year. We'll see when that actually comes out, but I'm excited.
On top of that, he's also a member of Lin-Manuel Miranda and Thomas Cale's freestyle rap group, Freestyle Love Supreme.
Yeah, FLS. Chris Jackson has actually been a part of that too, right?
Right. And they've performed across the country. So that's a really cool thing. I didn't really know about this before taking these notes, so I'm excited to find out more about that.
And speaking of being surprised by Hamilton references when we're in the movie theater not expecting them, talking about Lin-Manuel Miranda being in the credits of The Force Awakens, I was watching Zootopia, and I heard a very, very familiar voice, and I knew exactly who it was. I had no question whatsoever when I heard Daveed Diggs rapping a number for the animated film Zootopia. Fun movie.
And if you needed one more reason to watch The Get Down, Daveed Diggs actually plays the narrator on the show, the adult Zeke. So there you get some more Daveed Diggs on the Netflix show, actually.
And I can never get enough Daveed Diggs.
He's going to be in season 3 of Blackish, which starts September 21st, as well as an upcoming HBO sports mockumentary created by Andy Samberg called Tour de Pharmacy. So that should be interesting.
Andy Samberg is hilarious.
He definitely is.
I can't wait to see what they do with the sports scene mockumentary.
And finally, he will play a supporting character in a 2017 drama film called Wonder, which comes out April 7th, 2017.
That's a lot of stuff for our first 3 actors that we've covered.
Right.
Lin-Manuel Miranda, Leslie Odom Jr., Daveed Diggs. They have their hands in so many different pots. They are wearing so many different creative hats. It's incredible to imagine what their schedules must look like.
Yeah, I completely understand them stepping down from Hamilton.
The rest of the original cast that we're going to cover don't have nearly as many things bullet pointed underneath their names on our notes page that we have taken before recording this episode, but they are nonetheless just as important to Hamilton, an American musical, and just as beloved in our hearts.
Christopher Jackson, as we mentioned, is a part of that freestyle rap group, Freestyle Love Supreme, but he's still on the Broadway show and focused on that fully for the time being. He's not really branching out to any other creative endeavors.
I remember reading in the Hamiltome a article about Chris Jackson, and when Lin-Manuel Miranda was working with him on In the Heights, he was thinking of this idea of a Hamilton musical, and he was trying to figure out who would play this role. And he looked up and he saw his coworker, Chris Jackson from In the Heights. He said, he's a tall man, very composed, very regal, a very talented baritone person. And he said, I want him to be my George Washington. I want him to be my G-dubs, as he called him. He said, be the original president. And it was interesting to see all of the love that Lin-Manuel Miranda showers on Chris Jackson in the Hamiltome. He talks about how Chris, in the role of Washington, plays the kind of the crew leader of the backstage stuff. He's the one who gathers the actors and musicians and the crew backstage to hold hands and have a little bit of a prayer before every single show, before the performances. That's like a half of a locker room pep talk and half of a petition to God. And he's the guy who leads these pre-performance pep talks, just kind of giving him a quiet moment and dedicating the night to God. And apparently when he closes the group company prayer, a lot of the times he will say that he wants the audience to leave the theater a better person than when they walked in. And this is the kind of guy that I imagine is embodying the George Washington nobility that we know and love. Chris is a history buff, and he loves George Washington, and it's fascinating to see him fill these shoes. And I am excited to see what he does next, but I'm also really, really sad to think that there will be a day when he won't be George Washington in Hamilton.
It's really nice to see that he's not just acting Washington. There's a part of him that is like Washington, that he has that same character. And what an honor to have someone come up to you and go, I see Washington in you. Will you be my Washington?
Oh man, I love that. Lynn said that if Chris Jackson ever wanted to become a pastor, then he would have a megachurch because people just flock to him and follow him. And apparently Chris Jackson trained himself in singing by singing in a lot of church choirs growing up. And it's just interesting to see a lot of his passion there whenever you're watching an interview with Chris Jackson, he's always so encouraging and kind and builds up every person in the audience in a way that's just really interesting. And I think he does really embody George Washington in an incredible way.
Moving on to Jonathan Groff, our King George. It was reported this year that he's going to be starring in a Netflix series as well called Mindhunter, produced by David Fincher and Charlize Theron. It looks like it's going to be a murder mystery procedural type show.
Yeah, that's not always my cup of tea, but because Jonathan Groff is in it, I am not going to throw that tea in the Boston Harbor. Right. I am going to follow my King George III into this Netflix series.
Right, so keep an eye out for that in 2017. He's also in a web series called One True Pairing. Episodes of that show can be found at otptheshow.com.
As we mentioned, there are a few others that are joining Chris Jackson in reprising their roles and continuing their roles on Broadway. So Jasmine Cephas-Jones, who plays Peggy Schuyler and Mariah Reynolds in the musical, will be staying on Broadway. She'll be there with Anthony Ramos and Oak, who will be reprising their roles as John Lawrence, Philip Hamilton, and Hercules Mulligan and James Madison, respectively.
Tony Award-winning Thomas Kail, the director of our show, has actually moved on to do some other things as well. He directed Grease Live for Paramount Television, screened live on Fox in January, and he directed the world premiere of Dry Powder at the Public Theater in New York City.
One of the things that is so incredible about Hamilton, an American musical, is how kinetic the entire show is, with the ensemble moving perpetually, and the dancing that happens on stage is so fun, and the musical itself would not be as amazing as it is without the choreographer, Andy Blankenbuehler, who has moved on from the show and is now choreographing the revival of the movie Dirty Dancing. That makes me really excited.
Yeah.
I grew up watching this. I love it. Nobody puts baby in a corner. Dirty Dancing's fun, and I don't know how I feel about them remaking this because the movie itself is so close to my heart still, right. But I do trust that Andy Blankenbuehler will do a great job choreographing that in itself.
He also choreographed a revival of the Broadway musical Cats, which opened on August 2nd. Now, as I mentioned when we started with Lin-Manuel Miranda, Ron Chernow is going to end us out here. Ron Chernow is actually writing a new biography. He's writing one for Ulysses S. Grant. So if you're a fan of Ron Chernow's biographies, you have a new one to look forward to. However, we don't have a set release date. It's going to be coming out sometime between 2017 and 2018.
And that's fine with me because I have so many biographies still on my reading list and on my shelf that as soon as Chernow releases a new one, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have time.
Right.
Well, that about does it for the cast and crew and creators of Hamilton, an American musical that we were able to dive into. We obviously couldn't get into every single person that has been on that stage, that has touched a soundboard, that has opened the doors and set the playbills where they need to go in the theater, but we really have tried to do the best we can to track down where some of our favorite characters and actors and creators are going. If you think that we've missed somebody and you have an interesting story you want to tell us about what else is going on in the world of Hamilton, then definitely hit us up. Our contact information is contact@graphocast.com. That's our email. Graphocast is GRAPHOCAST, or you could hit us up on Twitter @Graphocast.
You can also leave comments on these episode posts on the website, graphocast.com. All of our shows are brought to you ad-free by our lovely Patreon supporters. If you would like to join them in supporting this podcast network and everything we do here, you can check out patreon.com/graphocast to give financially and get some exclusives.
That's right. And we know we've already announced that we're doing a Hamilton exclusive very, very soon. We apologize that it's taken a few more weeks than we expected originally to get that out to you. We recorded the beginning of it just a few minutes before we sat down, and I think that it's going to be interesting. I think you'll enjoy what we were putting together for that, but we will be putting that out very soon. If you have questions that you didn't get to send to us before, since we have a little bit more time to put that Hamilton exclusive together, you can still submit more questions to us at those contact points. And remember when we told you that we are going to dive into 1776, the musical surrounding the Revolutionary era and focusing a lot on John Adams's life? Well, that's happening next week. 1776, we'll dive into Act 1 of that new musical, the one that is quoted in Hamilton, an American musical at least once, and is very, very similar in tone. So if you wanted to get on YouTube, you want to get on Spotify and listen to your 1776 original Broadway cast, that's what we're going to be diving into next week, and we're still going to get into the history. We're going to dive into what are the Hamilton influences that came from this musical, and we hope that you will enjoy our diving into 1776 next week.
Until next week, you can find me on Twitter @FleshEater.
And I'm @Alpha Knight. Generally operating normally, a small anomaly has become evident and probably should be noted. There is spiking in the pulse of a member of the cargo and the crew and other passengers are not beginning to notice. The facility you certainly take yourself to cultivate for all intents and purposes is totally accepted, but the readings that are coming through are not negating wholly the hypothesis and seems to be unable to suggest it. First. I made it all the way to the first.
Generally operating normally, a small anomaly has become evident and probably should be noted. There is spiking in the pulse of a member of the cargo, and the crew and the other passengers have not begun to notice. The facility, you'd certainly take your...
Did you know you're adding a word "the" there, and the crew and the other and the crew and other passengers? That might help your rhythm.
Yeah, and the crew and other passengers have not begun to notice.
Yeah.
This has been a Graphomania production. If you would like to hear more podcasts, go to graphocast.com, graphocast.com. Follow us on Twitter at Graphocast and like the Graphomania page on Facebook for news and updates.